You had a moment where God spoke to you. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it was at the Kotel, the Western Wall in Jerusalem.
Right.
It was very simple, just a few words. They don't know. I was standing next to Haredim, ultra-Orthodox Jewish men, davening, putting prayers in the cracks of the wall, and I couldn't interpret what that meant at the time. But as I thought more about it, and I processed it with friends, it was clear that God was saying, they don't know me, speaking of Jesus, and you are going to do something about it.
Did that scare you? Or was that, were you expecting to be sharing with people about Jesus as a Jewish young man?
Not in some ways, it was the most natural thing that could happen because I come from a family of 6 generations of Jewish believers in Jesus.
That's awesome.
All of them who would tell our Jewish brothers and sisters about who Jesus is as the Messiah, but it was something that I had kind of run from doing myself for a large part of my life, and I didn't really want that as my path.
Why do you think that you were running from that?
I wanted to do things my own way. I wanted to have my own life with my own ambitions, and I wanted to be a musician. That's why I moved here to Los Angeles.
Nice.
And I didn't necessarily have a problem with Jesus, didn't have a problem with faith in Jesus, but I wanted to do things on my own terms. Mm-hmm. And it was in that moment when everything changed. And the destiny of my family for the past several generations became my own destiny that I was embracing rather than running from.
I can relate to that. I mean, I also heard about Jesus as a kid, and I never doubted if he was real or if it was true, but it was more like, is this the life that I want to commit to?
Yeah, with rejection, with misunderstandings, with having to constantly explain yourself, not fitting in like this camp or that camp, not feeling at home amongst like fellow Jewish people or Christians, people who follow Jesus, and having to like explain and over-explain myself. It got exhausting, and I was kind of tired of that. But in that moment, it turned into less of an inconvenience and more of like a mission.
Yeah.
It's like why I believe God put me on this earth.
So once you put that together, that this was sort of God revealing your life's mission to you, what did you do next?
I was back in Los Angeles after having been in Israel, and instead of continuing on the path of being a successful musician, music producer, engineer in music studios, I was like up late hours of the night, like editing drums on the computer and stuff like that. Instead of continuing down that path, I started studying the Bible like crazy. I started to understand that this destiny that God had called me to, that had meant so much to my family, that was now something that I was embracing, was something I had to be familiar with to the extent that I wanted to be able to answer people's questions. I wanted to be able to explain it in a way that didn't just make sense to me because I had grown up with it, but could be explained to any Jewish person, no matter what their background was.
You know, it's so interesting to me how it was once you realized your identity of who God had made you to be, that the Bible was so alive and magnetic to you. And I think sometimes it's like, I mean, I'm sure many of us have had those moments where you're trying to like force yourself to like engage with the Bible, and it feels dry because it has to come out of sort of how God is working in your own life, and then that's pushing you to look into His Word deeper. Yeah,
within the Bible itself, God says that there's like these blinders that are over our eyes that actually have to be spiritually removed. It's not something that we can kind of figure out ourselves. It's something like even the most logical, rational person can kind of look into the Bible and say, like, yeah, this makes sense on one level, but not in the sense of like being able to actually have a relationship with God. That's something that we can't produce ourselves. That's something that God has to remove this like spiritual
Mm-hmm.
blinders from our eyes to be able to see who he is and what he has for us. And in being willing and being open to have those blinders removed and listen, that everything starts to make sense.
Yeah. Well, and even that idea of like, what's my mission? I mean, that's a dangerous prayer to pray. Like, God, show me what's the mission that you put me on this world for, and then bring that alive in how in your word, you know, in my life. And I believe that he honors prayers like that.
Yeah. And it's like, it's the same for somebody who's known, you know, about Jesus your whole life, or you're just kind of like discovering who Jesus is for the first time. It's being willing and having the willingness to say like, this might completely change the trajectory of what my life looks like and what I wanted for myself. But if God is real and this is all true, then the trajectory that God would put me on is like honestly the best thing, because my Creator knows me better than I know myself. And he has a destiny for me that's for good, and it's better than something I would have come up with myself.
But have you ever regretted not pursuing music professionally and instead going the ministry route?
That's the funny thing is, honestly, when I kind of surrendered that and said like, not on my terms, on your terms, God.
Yeah.
I've gotten so many amazing opportunities to use these abilities and skills that God has given me, but for meaningful purposes instead of my own like self-aggrandizement and my own ambitions and stuff like that, which is so empty because it's temporal. It lasts for like a moment. And you know, any like successful musician or actor or anything like that can tell you like the amount of glory, I guess, that you get after finally achieving your moment. It's not very long before you have to start chasing something else, because it's a high. It doesn't last long. But with God, it's like it all has this eternal purposes that like everything that you do for God just kind of echoes into eternity. Yeah. You know?
I have a friend who performed at Madison Square Garden, and I asked her later, like, what was that experience like? And she was like, it was exactly like being on stage at my high school. You know, it's like, it's a stage, it's a moment, but there's like a bottomless pit of trying to like find success for yourself.
Totally.
And when you put your focus instead on serving others, you actually find much deeper meaning and joy. I completely resonate with everything you said. So if someone, you know, is watching this and they relate to your story and they're asking that question, like, God, what is your mission for my life? Do you have any advice for that person?
I would say there's no better place to find God's mission for your life than actually like sitting with the Bible open and asking that question. Because what I believe is that the Bible is completely distinct from all other forms of literature, other forms of communication. It's God actually revealing himself to us. God wants to be known. God has made a way for us to know him. And so if you, in faith, kind of sit down, open this up, and kind of say, I want to know you. I know, God, that you want me to know you. And say, what is it that you have for me? He answers.
That's awesome.
I've had it time and time again where I've been at the end, because it isn't just like this one moment where everything is like fine now since I've made a decision, but I've been in regular intervals, like at the end of myself going, I don't really know where to go next. And it's always God speaking faithfully through the word, through the Bible, and being willing to do something about it. Because often it confronts us as like a mirror for ourselves, and then we don't really want to do what it says, and we're resisting it.
There's a verse that says, where Jesus says, blessed are you who hear my word and obey it, right? So it's like you have to hear it, and then you have to say, okay, I'm gonna walk in obedience and say yes, even if I don't know the end of the story.
That's right.
And that's like, I guess, what faith is. In addition to music, I know you also have a very deep love for coffee. and that now you actually use coffee in like the ministry that you do. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so here in Los Angeles, I get the pleasure of operating in my work with Jews for Jesus, coffee, art, and community space called Upside Down.
Awesome.
It's right across the street from UCLA, and on a regular basis, you can come in Monday through Friday and get a really good cup of coffee and just kind of like learn more about what it means to follow Jesus as a Jewish person. We do events, we do art gallery exhibitions, we wrestle with topics of faith, we have Shabbat dinners on a regular basis. And it's just a space where you, like as a person, kind of set the level of engagement that you'd like to have with spiritual subjects, and without having it kind of like crammed down your throat.
Yeah, no pressure.
Not at all.
Yeah.
You can kind of walk in and be from any like faith background or like, religious background, and feel welcome and feel comfortable. And if you want to go there, we'll go there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and for that insight. And I mean, I hope that people watching this, if you're watching this right now, ask God that question. Ask him, what's my mission? Why have you put me on this earth? And then open the Bible and ask him to show you through his word what he's created you to do. And then leave a comment. Let us know what God showed you. Come in to Upside Down in LA and hang out with our team there.
Yeah.
And we'll just keep the conversation going.